I was approached by the publishers, by Ebury, by Random House to do a book and another book. I've done a few before, and then I said to Scully, why don't we do a Nopi cookbook? Because over the years, this place will have been 5 years. Next
February.
Yeah. We've had so many amazing recipes and so many happy customers that come in and just love what we do, and we thought, like, okay, let's do a book. Let's showcase our food. And Scully here, who's got a really amazing palate and a whole range of Asian ingredients up his sleeve, really introduced new ingredients to me and to the Ottolenghi family. So it was all about showcasing those ingredients in the restaurant.
It is a true collaboration. Like, I have to say that last 8 years we've been working together on and off.
Yeah.
We always bounce back from food ideas, and it's just been great to have a book with that Asian influence at the same time having the Middle Eastern ways, and it's been great in that combination.
The way we work is that normally Scully comes up with a new dish for this restaurant, and he presents it to me or to Sammy, and then we try it, we test it, we discuss it. I might suggest an alteration, a modification. He might come up with a new thing later, and then we kind of work together. But most of the dishes are really Scully's creations that are kind of stem from his background in Malaysia. There's quite a few Indian dishes, Chinese. So there's a lot of kind of Southeast Asia influences in the food.
So I was born in Malaysia. Around 8 years old, Mum basically said to me, we were going to live in Australia. So having the whole Malaysian background and an Asian family, I have 9 aunties, so we have a strong influence in good cooking. I have to say, when I was a kid, I wasn't a small kid. I was just always abundance with a lot of food on the table. And then when I got to Australia, it was a whole different ballgame for me. I noticed there's a big Middle Eastern culture in Australia, a lot of multicultural influence. So growing up there too, I started learning about the tahinis and the sumac and the barberries. And then later on, around that age of 16, 17, I just realized that I think this is the way to go. I've always been surrounded with food, loved understanding food, and I thought it was time to be a chef. And yeah, it's been great on that journey and right now.
I've learned so much from Scully. I mean, I think when we met, which was in 2003 or four,
yeah.
I had a very vague understanding or knowledge of the Southeast Asian food or Asian food. And I kind of was very much, both Sammy and I are, we're the children of the Middle East. We were completely into our vegetables and lenses and pulses and rice and all those wonderful things, tahinis and chickpeas. And I had a really very cursory knowledge of Asian food, and over the years, through Scully, through other people that I've worked with and traveling, I've really learned a lot about this world. And it's always, the nice thing with Scully is that he doesn't only cook Asian food, he mixes things up in a really interesting way. So, he could take an ingredient, that I would consider quite different, like miso paste, which now I use quite a lot, but I didn't used to 8 years ago, and really introduce it in all sorts of contexts. Now we even mix miso and tahini. It's that kind of implausible scenario, but we really do. We have a dish of venison with yogurt or labneh cheese and blackberries. It's a dish that really kind of conveys a whole spectrum of flavors as far as we're concerned. One of them is reduced yogurt, which is a labneh cheese, a completely familiar flavor to anyone who grew up in the Middle East. We add date syrup to it and pomegranate molasses to it. It's very thick. Yeah, that's the date syrup. And it's served with blackberries, cocoa nibs.
Yeah, and the twist is making a little bit of texture when you use stem ginger, cocoa nibs, and peanut. So I think that was a cool combination to finish off that dish. So you had a bit of Middle Eastern, you had the Western ways of cooking the venison, understanding it. And then we finish off a bit of the 3 components, the stem ginger, the cocoa nibs, and the peanuts.
So it's like a little crumbly thing that gives it quite a lot of texture at the end. And it really does convey a whole range of cooking. So that there's European traditional way, juniper berries and venison. I mean, it's a very familiar match.
Exactly.
But we have our little, the ginger comes into the equation, the labneh comes into the equation, and it still makes complete sense. It's not like, silly fusion. It's like serious. It's a serious dish with the very rounded flavors.
The quail dish, like we did with the blend miso butterscotch.
Yeah.
So the whole thing is simple quail, there's a little bit of a blend miso butterscotch, and then finish off with a pomegranate and walnut. So to mix that combination,
Yeah.
even my chefs were nuts that day when I did that tasting, but it actually worked out really well. So yeah.
So we take the miso and we add the salsa made out of pomegranate seeds and walnuts and vinegar, which is kind of Eastern Mediterranean. It's quite familiar to people in Iran and Georgia. It's one of these kind of flavors, and then mixing them together, we go like, oh God, does that work? But actually, it does work. It's a wonderful, warming dish, and it's
You got that umami
sweet
from the miso and the sweetness and the
Sweet
quail
and sour.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
We spend a lot of time, especially when we're working on the book, thinking up dishes, even more than thinking up dishes, trying to make dishes that started off in the restaurant kitchen work for home cooks, which is a massive challenge. And Scully always says, it's the biggest challenge I've ever had, to take food that is created for a restaurant and turn it into something that people could actually cook at home.
Yeah.
And we can spend hours thinking of, simplifying, substituting, making flavors work for you.
One of the best things when we were making this book in that 2.5 years ago in the test kitchen, because you always worked with the Guardian recipes. So it's always like, even though we're working on a Nopi cookbook, I always like listing what he was making for the next week Guardian. And sometimes we actually created some great dishes, came to Nopi main courses. The one I think was the nudie I'm playing right now.
Yeah.
But it's always been like that. It's always been a lot of food and passion about it. And sometimes I think we talk more about food than each other's lives, and it's a great thing.
We definitely do that. What we try to do is, because the dishes in the kitchen are quite labor intensive, they involve quite a few elements and certain ingredients that are hard to get. We kind of tackle it from all these directions when we translate it from a restaurant kitchen to something you can do in a domestic environment. So, first of all, in terms of the ingredients, of course we want to introduce the reader or the home cook to our favorite ingredients, like this dried mandarin peel or Szechuan peppers or miso. But we also at the same time try to offer alternatives. So we want to make sure that people don't stop when they read the ingredient list, but actually go and do it. So we try to find alternatives. So rather than dry orange peel for the famous Asian master stock that we use for the chicken, we use just normal orange skin, and it works. It doesn't give quite the same aroma, but it's quite close. So we do this on the ingredient front, and then on the complexity front, we try to see if we can pare down certain dishes without losing the
structure of the dish.
The structure and the main flavor profile. So, sometimes we might take a dish that is comprised of two elements and take only one element and make it into a new dish. Like a fish and a salad condiment can turn into just a salad. So just to make people's life a little bit more easy, but without losing the flavors.
The whole thing is, so we still told a story that how we actually serve it in Nopi. But out of this, one example is like I use our levich and nettles in the kitchen. Love the ingredient, and basically I just released like doing the book. You cannot buy it in the shops. You can't find it in your local Waitrose or Sainsbury's and Tesco's. So one of the things we learned out of it was basically some of the herbs we buy a normal day, like watercress, rocket, spinach, really comes really close to what you can get like levich and nettles. So that's a big go on that book basically. So. Like one thing I was going to say, the master stock chicken. I was a bit worried about this chicken we have. It's one of the staple dishes in Nopi. It's basically a baby chicken. It's been poached in the master stock. The few ingredients that you see here.
Master stock is an Asian, very dark stock made with soy sauce and lots of spices and Shaoxing wine and all sorts of. It's like intense. Salty and sweet.
So one thing we didn't cut short on the recipe. We kept the original recipe, but in Nopi we actually poach it for 20 minutes and then basically keep it in the marinade for 3 to 5 days before we cook it for the customer. So I was a bit worried that we're going to get that flavor intensive, and then after a few goes, making the chicken, splitting the chicken in half and still doing the same recipe, it actually works the next day too, and it's still got that strong flavor of the master stock, which I'm really happy about. So
we tried to take the reader through a journey, but giving them options for shortcuts. So like the master stock that Scully mentioned, where you kind of say, okay, instead of 3 days, we're going to allow for 1 day and try to kind of maximize the impact of the sauce without that length of time. we're not like religious about food. We think like, okay, if someone's gonna go and do a recipe, we'd rather they did it and not did it 100% right than not do it at all.
Yeah.
Because there's so many ingredients there and there's so many nice flavors. You can lose one or two things or take a certain shortcut and you're still gonna get a nice impact. And the master stock actually improves over time.
Yeah.
So you're kind of investing in something a bit like your mother dough, your mix for sourdough. You know, it's just there.
Your base.
You keep on feeding it, and it just improves over time. That's the essence of
my
master stock.
mother, I think, she's lasted 6 years in the freezer. You know,
one master stock.
Yeah, one master stock. There's times like she'll go longer, but you know, she throws it after a few years later. But it depends how many times she uses it. When I did the tasting for Yotam, I did it two different. I did it with the lamb and I did it with the beef.
Well, master stock.
Yeah, master stock. Then I later on years, if you look at the recipe, like you know, we want to get a bit more upscale. You can take the dark soy sauce and a little bit of light soy sauce instead, just mixing around, and you can actually poach it with the fish. You know, and you can actually poach it with vegetables too if you want, like spring onions, enoki mushrooms, shiitake. Really works well.
It's essentially having something as potent as soy sauce, but a bit sweeter with a little bit more spices going on in it. Yeah. So it really allows you to introduce it into your cooking. And if you can reduce it and make it really thick and sticky, that could go on, you know, on pork ribs or anything kind of meaty. But if you dilute it with a bit of vinegar. Or a bit of
a bit of water, you can turn it into a light broth for the evening.
Yeah,
you know, so.
Or a bit of mirin.
Yeah.
And you get something really light. So essentially, you can use it for almost anything. I mean, we also use it in the beef brisket croquettes, which are really nice, intense croquettes with brisket, and that's really reduced. So you get like this kind of sticky, meaty things that's then paned and fried. Something really delicious.
But now I realize that once you make it once for the book, you can always just pull it out your fridge anytime and do that recipe with so many different goes. Yeah, I hope the readers will enjoy making that stuff and really understand it.
I'd say, in my opinion, I mean, if someone doesn't feel completely confident to tackle the very complicated recipes in this book, there is a section for simple side dishes that still have wonderful flavors but are really simple to cook. Like there's this celeriac that's roasted for a very long time and it only has like 3 ingredients, you know, celeriac, olive oil and salt, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So there's some key recipes, or there's the carrots with the cheese. What's the cheese?
That was the Belpa cannoli. We use feta cheese instead.
Yeah. So, you know, there's certain recipes that are really kind of simple to tackle, and they're obvious because the ingredient list would be, you know, 3 to 8 ingredients rather than 20 ingredients. And they really do deliver on flavors, you know, Asian green vegetables with chili and ginger and all sorts of stuff like that. Once you feel a little bit more confident, you can move on to the more complicated recipes, and then you can move on to the epic recipes that, you know, that are kind of like a weekend's commitment, like our pastilla, which involves, you know, shredding and cooking spinach and making layers and then filling it with phyllo and baking. I mean, there's quite a few of those. Not that many, but some recipes are a commitment, but others are actually not.
One of the main things for the master stock recipe, like Szechuan peppercorns, gives that little, you know, like that zesty, what do you call it? That numbness you get in the mouth. So it gives that. The Szechuan, and another thing too, guys, Szechuan is basically versatile for anything. You can crush it up into corn flour and plain flour and coat it with your tofu. Yeah. So you get like a nice Szechuan tofu.
Or prawns.
Yeah, exactly. Really nice. Shangsi this is one of the bases for the master stock. To be honest, I wouldn't be drinking it, but it actually gives it a whole different flavor. Dry mandarins, like Yotam said, if you don't have that, you can use orange peels, even fresh mandarin peels when they're in season.
Also, we have mirin, which we use a lot. Yep. We don't have it here because it's in massive bottles for the kitchen, but we use a lot of mirin. Nice, sweet depth of flavor. We use a lot of miso. This is like a kind of more commercial side, but you can buy them in smaller packets in the supermarket, and it's like the shortest, one wonderful shortcut to have up your sleeve to give something flavor, really deep flavor, without working so hard or cooking for so long, because all the fermentation has been done, all the intensity of flavor has been done already for you. It's a bit like using Parmesan. You know, it's intensive flavor, and then you can spread it over meat, you can spread it over vegetables. I do roast vegetables with miso. Yeah. I love roasting vegetables. I add a bit of miso, olive oil or another vegetable oil, and you stick it in the oven, you get wonderful flavor. So that's like flavors for free almost.
Well, this is the mother of all Ottolenghi's ingredients, the preserved lemon. Like sometimes I think like we go probably about every 3 months I probably make three huge cases, like 25 kilo of case of like, so 75 kilos, and every 3 months just go with lemons. And it's the good thing about all this kind of stuff, like you just let it grow, like, in 3-4 months you pick it up and the lemon's got a whole different flavor.
And they start going darker and darker.
Yeah.
When you go in Marrakesh, you see that grades of lemon, of preserved lemon. You can see the pale ones and the darker and the darker. That's when it's a year old, and they just got these amazing flavors.
Yeah. Like, when I first started cooking, I always thought vinegar is vinegar, and then as you go through many years of trying different vinegars and that, it does make a difference. It really refines your cooking to some level. So when it comes to sherry vinegars, the Velda Spina for me, it's got that sour kick, but it's really smooth back in your palate. So you want really something acidity, sharp. It's really great. Another one is the Pedro Animus. For me, it's the sweet vinegar. So I use that for different balancing for different things. Yeah. And I do recommend people to go buy some good vinegars. It's really make a difference in your cooking.
Balsamic vinegar is great, but Pedro Jimenez has got a little bit more subtle sweetness and a bit more complexity, I find, on occasion, and it just gives you a slightly different thing. But again, it's from that same. As Scully was saying, with vinegars, you really get a whole range of flavors. And these two sherry vinegars, we use them throughout the book a lot. Like you find them in quite a few recipes. Again, exactly like you said, the vinegar is like, there's a whole world of vinegars, and what you choose to put in your salad, in your stew, in your in your stir fry would really kind of affect the whole thing if you use the wrong vinegar.
It's the same thing when I first started working for you. The lemon juice was very, very big in the Ottolenghi kitchen. We go through a lot of lemon juice, by the way, but it's definitely one of those like things that you can, instead of using vinegar, lemon juice is another acidity you can add to your cooking. For me, it's a good frying pan. You got to have a good non-stick frying pan, that's one of the main things for me, a good stick knife, and for me, a spatula. I don't know why, a rubber spatula. I just feel that, I'm so used to using spoons in the kitchen, but rubber spatula is one of the things that you need to have in your home. How about you? I'm pretty sure you got one or two.
I mean, my basic tools, I even take them with me on holiday, are my garlic crush and my lemon squeezer. Because, I've got this one of those yellow lemon squeezer that you just stick half a lemon, just juices, you don't get any pips in. Because I use so much of both, I can't be bothered to start chopping them up or squeezing lemons with the juice. I want to have those two hands, because those are the two key ingredients. And we're very low tech. In this kitchen we'll have a lot of complicated stuff, like Thermomix and all sorts of gadgets. But actually, for this book, for the Nopi cookbook and the way I cook at home, it's very, very basic stuff. You want to get a really sharp knife, a mandolin for quick slicing, your lemon juicer, your garlic crush, a good frying pan, non-stick, like Scully says. A
good blender too. I think really efficient to do like little purees and your pestos and that kind of stuff. So.
And even stuff that we do like smoking, we do it really low tech. We don't have a smoker, but we do smoke labneh cheese. So we do it in a pan over a little tray or over a little rack, and you can really use very simple ingredients to get equipment for getting really good flavors.
The shortcuts, I think for me it was more about giving tips to the readers. I think that it wasn't much shortcuts in my point of view when I did the dishes. For me it was like the tips of how to make your soup nice and green, so after blitzing it, the pea soup.
Chilling it.
Chilling it, and just basically one of the tricks of that, after blitzing that kind of color soup, you want to keep that chlorophyll, the green. Blitzing it and then put it through a fine sieve in an ice water bath. When you're cooking onions and you wanted to really make your onions transparent, there's some stews in that book that a little pinch of salt really makes the onions, it slows down the cooking, and it really makes the onions nice and soft. So don't forget, guys, a little bit of salt when you're cooking onions really breaks everything.
Some shortcuts would be something like, buy your chili paste ready-made rather than make it yourself. That's the kind of a shortcut we often offer. But we did try to simplify certain processes. One of them has to do with the labneh. For the venison, which essentially here we cook it very low we put it in a vacuum pack, and we cook it for a very long time until essentially the yogurt caramelizes over a long period.
Yeah.
How long is it cooked for?
About 85 degrees for 12 hours.
Yeah.
So
We couldn't ask a home cook to take a jar of yogurt and cook it for 85 degrees for 12 hours. So essentially, what we do, we strain the yogurt like you do for Lebanon. You do it for various other ingredients. So just put it in muslin, lose the liquid, and then we added quite a bit of date syrup to it and pomegranate molasses. So you get the flavor of reduced yogurt, the intensity of the yogurt, plus all the molasses caramelly flavors from the date syrup. So we did quite a lot of these shortcuts, didn't we?
there's a few recipes in the book that I make sure that if you're having a dinner party, you can pre-make this stuff, like prep it all up, and when the guest comes in, all you need to do is reheat it. And we made sure of that. I can imagine having dinner parties, and my sister is one of them. Like, you walk into her dinner party, it's a chaos, because it's all about just like being so efficient in a way that this recipes really work in a way that you can prep it away, and when your guest comes in, your kitchen is beautiful, clean, and just warm it up, and you still look good. And one of them is the ricotta fritters. I thought that would be so hard that they have to deep fry a minute, but I noticed that we can deep fry a few, and then we put it in the oven, it still inflates it. Perfect.
Yeah, so really beautiful sweet ricotta fritters with blackberries, and they're just the most wonderful thing. I mean, it's very luxurious to serve such a dessert to your guests. And it's just about warming them up.
Even the courgette fritter, in Nopi we sell so much of these courgette fritters, and we do it a la minute. Then I've noticed that you can actually do it for the home cooks. You actually can cook it and then leave it on the tray. When your guest comes in, you just reheat it in the oven, and it still puffs up into a nice fluffy fritter.
They're one of our best sellers. I mean, those courgette fritters, we sell so many portions every day, and they're a very simple thing to do, and they are like massive winners. I think mainly also because of the flavors that we added, cardamom and lime. There's a cardamom and lime sour cream sauce or yogurt, sour cream.
Sour cream.
That we dip those in, and it's just like wow, this explosion of flavors that we just love.
So instead of finding shortcuts, I found more efficient ways of serving what we do in the restaurant now, and did it for home cooks. So I think that's a great thing. We learn out of that. So.
We have introducing our reader to quite a few new ingredients in this book. Things like the Valdespina sherry vinegar, things like black rice, like date syrup, like orange peel, like mirin and miso. We introduced the readers to those. And I think if you go shopping and get all those ingredients in one go, it's a small investment, but they will see you through so many recipes in this book because we keep on using them. Palm sugar appears in so many recipes. Tamarind paste or tamarind compound like the one we use here, concentrate. They're really, really key ingredients. They have a very long shelf life, and they just keep on appearing in the book. So essentially, you buy your stuff, and then you just carry on cooking from the book.
Me, I think I have a lot of moments that I do have to take away once in a blue moon. But if I do cook, it's basically for my flatmates. It's always nice to have a simple dish, cook after work, and then you have your flatmates to talk about. But when I do dinner parties, I go the whole way.
He does.
And I'm not going to lie to you, I'll take the 2 days to get it ready. Because I just want to make sure. I always like people, you invite people at home, and you always watch them eat your food, and you have that little quietness for some. If you have a long, it's a good thing. You've done something right, and that's the main thing. And the hardest thing is the washing up part. So So.
I know, but you should let your flatmates do the washing up.
Why not?
I don't cook much during the week because I'm completely surrounded by food the whole day. Almost the last thing I want to do is eat. Sometimes I come home, I don't know about you, I come home in the evening, I cook some pasta, I put some olive oil on it, or I just have a slice of cheese and red wine, and that's for me for the day, because you're just so full of flavors, surrounded by flavors the whole day that you really don't want to eat. So normally when I cook properly, I cook on the weekend, and we have people over, and I normally want to do a nice selection of things. I'm not the kind of cook that serves a starter, a main course, and a dessert. I would have I wouldn't even call it meze, but a kind of spread of salads, roasted vegetables, maybe some grain like rice with lentils, and just present it really beautiful, a bit like the Ottolenghi style. and people just kind of indulge themselves in all those options. And this is how I like to cook. But I really cook much less than I ever used to, just because work is just such a...
We're surrounded with food constantly.
And constantly tasting and testing new recipes, so you really kind of cook much less.
Yeah, it's always nice when someone invites you to your house as a chef like you, and you go, oh, thank you, someone's cooking for me now. It's great.
I get invitations.
Yeah, I think you get more about it.
I get invitations, and I like to go to people's houses. I know sometimes that they feel pressurized because you think, oh, a chef comes over for dinner, and you think, oh God, I can really, blow it up. But essentially, and this is what I always tell to my friends and everybody: just cook me the same thing you cooked last time, because I don't want to be stunned. I just like really good food, and often people experiment on you, and I think this is the worst thing. I never experiment on my guests. I always cook something that I've already cooked a few times before.
And that's a good tip too.
I never experiment when you entertain. People go, I'm going to cook Burmese for these people because I've never cooked Burmese and I want to try this new cookbook. It's like the wrong thing to do, because you have no idea what you're doing, and it's just kind of
backfire to you anytime.
And I also like to go to friends and I ask them, oh, cook that same thing that you've done for me last time, and the time before that, and the time before that, because I know it's really good. Try to find the middle ground between the kind of the informality of the Ottolenghi style, the big platters and the kind of the big gestures, and a restaurant where like a kind of almost, it's not a formal, Nopi is not a formal restaurant, it's very informal, but it's still a high end in the sense that, things are, you pay a certain price and you get things presented in a nice way. So we wanted to make it work on both levels, and I think the way we've achieved it is that by serving it in smaller-ish portions, so people can have this kind of selection. So each plate looks really beautiful, but if you put it on the table and people get a bit messy with their fingers and kind of share, that's where the informality starts. So it's more about the dishes themselves look quite restaurant-y. Although we don't go to...
No, we don't go into a board.
We don't you don't do smears and things like that.
Exactly. I was going to say, like, if you look at our food in Nopi, it's pretty straight up forward. Like, the plating is very rustic. In a way that sometimes some of my new chefs are like, oh, chef, can we do this? Can we do canal? I was like, no, you're going to say, just tim it down a bit and just go simple. But the whole thing we always focus is flavor. And I think, when you get a pretty plate and the flavor's not that's really sad to you, But when you get a plate that looks average, but when you eat it, it blows your taste buds. I think that's a better turn on in the way in the food.
And I think we also have a certain sense of aesthetics, which is typical for us. Yeah. And we try to also do that in the book, convey it in the pictures. Like Scully and I did the cooking and the styling. I don't like the word styling, but plating. And I think there's a very clear sense, for me at least, and also I think for Scully, that how we like it, which is unfussy, but still looking elegant.
Yeah, not uniform.
I think now being autumn, the one recipe that I have in mind is the pork belly.
The pork belly, yep.
Yeah, because it's got the mashed pumpkin.
Yep, butternut squash.
Butternut squash, and so that's quite nice and autumnal. I think it's a great Christmas dish, or Thanksgiving, or anything you celebrate, October onwards.
And we got the apple salsa. Apple is a great time to actually eat it this time of the year. Yeah. And we did it with the apple and pickled walnuts.
So it's a layer of crushed butternut, a really crisp skinned pork belly, and then that beautiful salsa of walnuts and apple, so it's sharp and sweet at the same time, which is really good because the pork is so fatty.
I have to say, like, all recipes, all cookbooks, read it a couple of times, understand it. And I think some people don't read, when a recipe cookbook has an intro, do read it, because there's suggestions of doing alternatives. And if you read the Nopi introduction, the intros, we have a lot of suggestions, most of the recipes, that if you cannot find this ingredient, don't worry, you can use something else, or you don't want to use that component, you don't really need it. And so my biggest thing, read the recipe, mise en place, preparation, I think you'll be fine. I think it'll be a walk in the park once you achieve those two main things. So.
What I'd suggest for someone who's just starting off with this book is to try to cook for the first time some of the side dishes that are relatively simple. Like we've got baby carrots with parmesan and truffle vinaigrette, or the something like this mashed butter beans with rosemary and garlic. They'll give you an idea of the flavors, but with very little work. Yeah. And once you've done that, you're going to find things that you can move one step upwards, and then another step and do things like the twice cooked baby chicken or the pork cheeks or things that are taking a bit more work. But pace yourself. So I think a good indication as to a good recipe to start with would be one with a short ingredient list, and then go for the ones with the longer ingredient list, and that's normally a good idea of how complex the recipe is.
At the same time too, if you go through the steps, you are building your pantry to the next level. So make sure you get another extra shelf. That's another tip. So.